The morning sun blazed down on Fort Campbell, Kentucky, turning the parade ground into a shimmering sea of heat. It was July, and the air was thick enough to chew. Soldiers moved between buildings with the slow determination of people who had learned to conserve energy in brutal conditions. Major Catherine "Cat" Reyes walked across the base with a folder tucked under her arm. She was 5 feet 1 inch tall and weighed 115 pounds. Her uniform was crisp and perfect. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her boots were polished to a mirror shine. She looked like someone who could be blown away by a strong wind. That was what Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb thought when he saw her approaching the training facility. He was standing outside with a group of soldiers, waiting for the morning briefing to begin. Webb was 6 feet 4 and built like a refrigerator. He had arms the size of most people's thighs and a voice that could shake windows. He also had opinions about women in the military. Strong opinions that he shared freely with anyone who would listen. "Will you look at that," he said, nudging the soldier next to him. "They're letting kids join the army now." His friends laughed. There were 4 of them, all large men who had served under Webb for the past 2 years. They respected him because he was tough and experienced. They also shared many of his views. "Maybe she's someone's daughter," one of them suggested. "Came to visit Daddy at work." "In uniform?" Webb shook his head. "Nah, she's probably some admin clerk who got lost. Happens all the time. These little desk jockeys wander into the wrong buildings." Kat continued walking toward them. She had heard every word. Sound carried well across the parade ground, especially when people weren't trying to be quiet. But her expression remained neutral. Her pace didn't change. Webb stepped into her path as she approached the door. "Excuse me, miss," he said, putting heavy emphasis on the word. "Can I help you find where you're going? This is the combat training facility. Probably not where you want to be." Kat stopped and looked up at him. Way up. The height difference was almost comical. He towered over her like a mountain over a pebble. "I know exactly where I am, Sergeant," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. Webb raised an eyebrow. "Is that right? Because this facility is for combat personnel. Soldiers who actually fight." He gestured at her small frame. "No offense, but you look like you'd blow away in a firefight." His friend snickered behind him. Kat's expression didn't change. "Your concern is noted. I'm just being realistic." Webb crossed his massive arms. "Look, I've been in the army for 15 years. I've seen what combat does to people. It's not pretty. It's not safe. And it's definitely not a place for someone who looks like they should be teaching kindergarten." "Kindergarten," Kat repeated. "Or maybe elementary school. Whatever." Webb shrugged. "Point is, whatever paperwork you need filed, it's probably in the admin building. That's 3 blocks east. Big building. Can't miss it." Kat looked at him for a long moment. Her brown eyes were steady and unreadable. There was something in them, something Webb couldn't quite identify. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something else entirely. "Tell me, Sergeant Webb," she said. "How did you know my name?" Webb blinked. "What? You haven't asked my name. You haven't looked at my credentials. You haven't done anything except judge me based on my size." She tilted her head slightly. "So how do you know what I'm capable of?" "I can see what you're capable of," Webb said, but some of the confidence had left his voice. "It's obvious." "Is it?" Kat stepped closer to him. Despite the height difference, something about her presence made Webb want to step back. He held his ground, but it took effort. "Let me tell you something about obvious," Kat said. "Obvious is easy. Obvious is lazy. Obvious is looking at someone and deciding you already know their story." She paused. The most dangerous people I've ever met didn't look dangerous at all. That's what made them deadly. Before Webb could respond, the door to the training facility opened. A young lieutenant stepped out, looking flustered. "Major Reyes," he said, addressing Kat. "The general is asking for you. The briefing is about to start." "Major." The word hit Webb like a punch to the stomach. He looked at Kat's uniform again, actually looking this time, and saw the gold oak leaf insignia on her collar. "Major." That meant she outranked him by several levels. Kat turned back to Webb. Her expression was still neutral, but there was something in her eyes now. Something that looked almost like pity. "See you inside, Sergeant," she said. She walked past him and through the door. Webb stood frozen, his face cycling through shades of red. His friends had gone silent, suddenly finding the ground very interesting. The lieutenant lingered for a moment, looking at Webb with barely concealed amusement. "Word of advice, Sergeant," he said quietly. "You might want to read the briefing materials before you open your mouth. Major Reyes isn't just any officer." "What do you mean?" The lieutenant smiled. "You'll find out soon enough." He disappeared inside, leaving Webb standing in the brutal Kentucky sun, wondering what he had just gotten himself into. Catherine Maria Reyes was born in Del Rio, Texas, in a small house 3 miles from the Mexican border. The house had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen where her grandmother made tortillas every morning before sunrise. Her father was a farm worker named Miguel. Her mother was a hotel maid named Rosa. They worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week, and still barely had enough money to keep the lights on. But they never complained. They taught Kat that hard work was its own reward. Kat was always small. Even as a baby, she was tiny, born 3 weeks early, weighing barely 5 pounds. The doctors worried she wouldn't survive. Her grandmother lit candles in the church every day for a month, praying for the little one to grow strong. She survived. She grew strong. But she never grew tall. By the time she was 12, it was clear that Kat would never be a big person. She topped out at 5 feet 1 inch, shorter than most of her classmates, shorter than many of the younger kids. The boys called her Mouse and Tiny and other names that were meant to make her feel small in more ways than one. The girls weren't much kinder. They excluded her from games, laughed at her behind her back, whispered that she would never amount to anything because who could take seriously someone so small? Kat learned to fight back. Not with fists, she knew she couldn't win that way. Instead, she fought with determination. She studied harder than anyone else. She ran faster than anyone else. She pushed herself to be better in every way that she could control. Her father noticed. "Mija," he said one evening, watching her do homework at the kitchen table. "Why do you work so hard?" "Because I have to," Kat replied without looking up. "Because no one expects me to." Miguel sat down across from her. His hands were calloused from decades of labor, his face weathered by the sun. But his eyes were kind. "Your grandmother came to this country with nothing," he said. "She didn't speak English. She had no money. She had no friends. Everyone told her she would fail." He paused. "She didn't fail." "I know, Papa." "Do you know why?" Miguel leaned forward. "Because she understood something that most people never learn. Size doesn't matter. Money doesn't matter. What matters is what's in here." He touched his chest. "Your heart. Your will. Your refusal to give up." Kat finally looked up from her homework. "But people judge you by what they see." "Yes, they do. And that's their weakness, not yours." Miguel smiled. "Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're small and weak and unimportant. And then, when the moment comes, show them who you really are." Those words stayed with Kat for the rest of her life. She graduated high school as valedictorian. She earned a scholarship to Texas A&M, where she joined the ROTC program. She was the smallest cadet in her class, and she finished at the top. The Army was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be a meritocracy, a place where performance mattered more than appearance. Kat believed that with all her heart. Reality was more complicated. Her first assignment was at Fort Hood, Texas. She was a second lieutenant, fresh out of officer basic course, eager to prove herself. Her commanding officer was a captain named Henderson who looked at her like she was a joke. "You're my new platoon leader," he said when they first met. They must be scraping the bottom of the barrel. Kat stood at attention. "I'm ready to serve, sir." "We'll see about that." The next 6 months were the hardest of her life. Henderson gave her the worst assignments, the most difficult tasks, the least support. He was waiting for her to fail. He was hoping for it. She didn't fail. She led her platoon through a grueling training exercise that left half the other units in chaos. Her soldiers, skeptical at first, came to respect her judgment and trust her decisions. By the end of her assignment, Henderson had been transferred out for unrelated misconduct, and Kat had been promoted to first lieutenant. It was the first of many victories. And the first of many battles. The years that followed tested Kat in ways she never imagined. She served in Iraq during the surge, leading a platoon through some of the most dangerous streets in Baghdad. She served in Afghanistan, coordinating logistics for operations that reached into the most remote valleys of the Hindu Kush. She earned a Bronze Star for valor after leading a convoy through an ambush that killed 3 of her soldiers. She also earned enemies. There were always men like Staff Sergeant Webb. Men who looked at her size and saw weakness. Men who heard her voice and heard softness. Men who watched her lead and waited for her to stumble. Most of them came around eventually. Some of them didn't. Kat learned to accept both outcomes with the same quiet determination. But the hardest challenge wasn't the doubters. It was the losses. In 2009, Kat was commanding a company in Kandahar province. Her unit was tasked with protecting a key supply route that ran through territory controlled by the Taliban. It was dangerous work, convoys were attacked almost daily, and the enemy knew the terrain better than anyone. On October 15, everything went wrong. A routine patrol was hit by a coordinated ambush. Multiple IEDs detonated simultaneously, disabling the lead and rear vehicles. Enemy fighters poured fire from elevated positions on both sides of the road. The soldiers were trapped. Kat was at the forward operating base when the call came in. She listened to the radio traffic, hearing the panic in her soldiers' voices, hearing the explosions and gunfire in the background. She made a decision. "I'm going out there," she told her executive officer. "Ma'am, that's a kill zone. The QRF is 15 minutes out. My soldiers don't have 15 minutes. She grabbed her weapon and headed for the nearest vehicle. 3 other soldiers volunteered to go with her. They drove into the ambush. What happened next became legend in her unit. Kat directed fire from an exposed position, drawing enemy attention while her soldiers maneuvered to better cover. She called an air support with precision that the pilots later described as surgical. She personally dragged 2 wounded soldiers to safety while bullets cracked around her like angry hornets. When the quick reaction force finally arrived, they found Major Reyes standing in the middle of the road, coordinating the evacuation of casualties. Her uniform was soaked with blood, some of it hers. Her face was blackened with smoke. Her voice was hoarse from shouting orders. She had saved 11 lives. But she couldn't save everyone. Private First Class James Morrison died that day. He was 20 years old, from a small town in Ohio. He had joined the army to pay for college. He wanted to be a teacher. Kat wrote the letter to his parents herself. She told them that their son had died bravely, that he had been a good soldier, that his sacrifice meant something. She didn't tell them that she had held his hand as he died, or that his last words had been a request to tell his mother he loved her. Some things were too heavy to put in a letter. The Bronze Star came with a citation that praised her extraordinary heroism and complete disregard for personal safety. Kat put the medal in a drawer and never looked at it again. "I don't deserve it," she told a fellow officer who asked about it. "The ones who deserve medals are the ones who aren't here to receive them." She carried James Morrison's memory with her like a stone in her pocket. She carried all of them, every soldier she had lost, every life that had ended under her command. They were with her always, a silent chorus of voices reminding her of the cost of war. By the time she received orders to Fort Campbell, Kat had been in the army for 18 years. She had commanded platoons, companies, and battalions. She had served in 3 combat zones. She had earned the respect of everyone who actually took the time to know her. But she still looked like a kindergarten teacher. And there were still men like Marcus Webb who couldn't see past that. The training facility's main room was filled with officers and senior enlisted personnel. They sat in rows of chairs facing a small stage, where a podium had been set up in front of a large screen. The air conditioning struggled against the July heat, and the room had the slightly stale smell of too many bodies in too small a space. Staff Sergeant Webb took a seat near the back, trying to make himself invisible. His earlier confidence had evaporated completely. He kept glancing at Major Reyes, who sat in the front row, reviewing notes on a tablet. The door opened, and everyone stood. Major General Thomas Bradley walked in. He was 62 years old, with a chest full of ribbons and the bearing of a man who had spent 40 years in uniform. He had commanded divisions in 2 wars. His reputation was spotless. "At ease," he said, taking his place at the podium. "Please, sit." The room settled. Bradley looked out at the assembled personnel with the calm authority of a man who was used to being in charge. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "As you know, this base is about to undergo significant changes. We're expanding our special operations training capabilities, and that means restructuring our command structure." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I've brought in someone to lead this effort. Someone who has more combat experience than most of the people in this room combined. Someone who has proven, time and again, that she is one of the finest officers in the United States Army." Webb felt his stomach drop. "Please welcome your new commanding officer," Bradley continued. "Major Catherine Reyes." The room erupted in applause as Kat stood and walked to the podium. She shook Bradley's hand and turned to face the audience. Her eyes swept across the room, taking in every face, every expression. They lingered on Webb for just a moment longer than necessary.